Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Ghost of the Dwarves Past event, in which the Lost Warrior is added to the game. So this week brings quite a few things, most notably a ton of stuff happening to Whitehelm. We ended up getting a new Kingdom Pass for Whitehelm, as well as a bit of a different reward system for it, that ended up tweaking it compared to last time. And on top of that, we also of course got a bunch of reworks for Whitehelm. I won't be going fully in detail to all of them because most of them are pretty small. I'll post a link in the description if you want to go check and read all of them yourself. Most of them are just tweaking a small amount of numbers to a degree where it won't really make that big of a difference. They also finally ended up fixing Lady Sapphira from back in like 2015 when she ended up getting slightly reworked, so they finally changed her slightly. Grand Inquisitor a little bit better in Arena, but the main ones that are pretty noteworthy are what ended up happening to the Mythics. So Guard's Avatar and Archdiva, both of them got a buff, and both of them are already pretty good Mythics. Guard's Avatar, main thing that he ended up getting is his final trait now gives double the amount of armor, so what his ability does is whenever an ally casts a spell, including himself, he ends up gaining additional armor. So this will end up giving him a lot of additional damage, as he has a 2-to-1 ratio. So being able to gain 4 more armor compared to before is a damage difference of 8 total damage, as you're now doing 2 additional damage to each enemy per cast that you have done on your team. So overall, not too bad. Ends up stacking up quite a bit extra damage and will make him pretty good in the few locations where he is used. I would say his most notable use case that you've probably seen me use occasionally or mentioned for videos is Tuesday faction events, or any faction event, for the lower level range. Whenever you have access to brown or yellow, you can end up running him with Sir Quentin Hadley. And the combination is really good for taking out the first 100 levels or so, which is very useful if you're just going for the bare minimum for getting all rewards on something like a Tuesday faction event. It doesn't have too many use cases outside of that, compared to things like, Stellarix existing and stuff like that. However, this does make him slightly more viable. And the other thing that they end up doing is he now gains his full ratio for magic. Before, he only gained half his magic, so let's say he had 50 magic, he would only gain 25 damage to all enemies. But now he does the full 1-to-1 ratio, so if he has 50 magic, he'll do 50 additional damage to all enemies. And is of course on top of his armor boost ratio that is still left at a 2-to-1. They unfortunately did not increase it to a 1x boost ratio, which would have been really cool. Don't get that confused for this. He's not a 1x ratio now for armor. He is a 1x ratio now for spell damage. So his armor boost ratio is still 2-to-1. So for every 2 armor he does 1 additional damage. Anyways, next we have Archdiva. Basically what they did to this is made it so it gains more stats. This is most noteworthy if you're using it on a scroll spam team, which tends to be the main way you use it. So if you end up casting this on the first slot, you'll now be able to gain a ton more durability so that first slot doesn't die. They still gain all their mana like they did before. And they'll also be able to gain the extra scaling off of all the stats. So they'll be able to gain a ton more attack, HP, and armor. So interesting to see how this pans out. For both of these teams, I'll be showing a team for it once we get to the teams, as well as using them and just kind of messing around with them and explore. But both of these buffs are to already good mythics that are just slightly better now. And that's pretty much it. Aside from that, they added a bunch of angel gems here and there, but nothing really substantial that's going to change anything. Anything that was useless before is still useless now, and anything that was good here before is still good now, so nothing has really happened in that regard. Anyways, the rest of this goes over to Kingdom Pass, so let's actually go take a peek at that now, as they have actually reworked the rewards a little bit. So for any of you that don't know, occasionally we get a rework for various kingdoms. Sometimes it is substantial stuff. In this case, it basically just tweaked the mythics and added a few angel gems here and there. However, with it, we also get a Kingdom Pass. Basically how this works is there are 50 free rewards, as well as 50 paid rewards. I think it's like $8 or your regional equivalent to end up getting it. And then you can buy more tiers. I'd highly advise not spending gems or money to skip tiers. But you can buy $8 to buy the second or the right half of this reward system. Basically, on the free side, you end up getting 1 copy of a pet, 1 copy of an ultra rare, 1 copy of an epic, and a new weapon all the way at the end. Keep in mind, for new kingdoms, this one is generally money locked in the future. However, I believe this will be obtainable in Soulforge in the future, as Whitehelm, of course, already has a money locked weapon, as do pretty much every kingdom in the game unless they're brand new. However, they actually added quite a few extra rewards onto the right side. So I believe this only had 2 deed books before, and now it has 3. But other things is they now added a handful of shiny keys, so you'll be able to get those. You'll be able to go get 1 full max mythic, so you have bronze, silver, and gold elite medals. And aside from that, I just wonder there was like 1 other tweak. Was that it? Yeah, those might have been most of the main tweaks then. So they added enough to be able to max out 1 mythic, and I could have sworn this was only 2 deed books before, and now it is 3. So a little bit of a buff overall to the side. But otherwise, the extra stuff that you get from the paid side, as far as actual content, is you get enough copies to max out the ultra rare, enough copies to max out the epic, enough copies to max out the pet, which probably the most noteworthy one is that saves either a major pet orb or about 2,500 gems of maxing it in the future. And you also get 1 copy of a legend and a tarot card. Keep in mind, while these are initially money locked, they will be available through in-game means about a month or 2 after the event has concluded. So in about 2 months from now, you should be able to go and get all of them, as this is a 2-week-long event. The 2 that are currently money locked are 2 of Swords, which does absolutely nothing unless it's going to be used to craft something. As far as the actual tarot card itself, it is as useless as it gets. And a troop that they actually ended up reducing its boost ratio. If you saw last night's stream, we actually went over him, and he had a 1-to-1 ratio, which actually would make him even stronger than Guard's avatar's buff that he got today. However, they actually toned him down from a 1-to-1 to a 3-to-1, so he's basically dead content that will never be used under any context, as Rowain gains more of a benefit and distributes his damage better than this guy does. So there isn't a single situation where you'd run this legend over just simply using Rowain. Unless you happen to like not have Guard's avatar and you're in like some kind of weird Whitehelm restriction. With like, I believe I have a Whitehelm event next week, so maybe in that niche situation it would come in. However, for the most part, you're pretty much never using this thing. It's weaker than Rowain, it's weaker than Guard's avatar. There's no use case for it. So it's basically just the alternative Guard's avatar if you don't have it under a Whitehelm restriction, and that's about all it's going to be used for. Aside from that, of course, we have the other things. So as far as the epic, it creates 4 angel gems and explodes 4 gems. This in premise is not bad, it just doesn't do enough. This angel gem number needs to be higher. Actually, 4 isn't fine, actually. But this explode gem needs to be higher. Only 4 for 13 mana cost, compared to where mana accumulation currently is right now, is so bad. Even if this was explode entire board, it would still be bad because you only get 50% mana from explodes compared to destroy, which is the full amount. So, yeah, even if this was infinite destroy, infinite explode, it would still be kind of horrible, as there are already troops for even less than that mana cost that can destroy for 100% value, where she can't even explode the entire board, and even if she did, it would only be for half value. So, overall, pretty bad. There are better ways to bless out there, most notably Wand. So, unfortunately, that is never going to get used. As far as the Ultra Rare, where's Ultra Rare and all this mess? Ultra Rare. Should be a billion copies of it. Ultra Rare is pretty unfortunate as well. It has a choice mechanic, but it doesn't really do enough to ever be viable. It basically just reduces a skill and is particularly good against, Daemons and Undead. However, there just isn't really much of a use case for this. Later in the game, if you want to do something like that, you'd just be using Guard's Avatar anyways. There are better ways to counter these kind of typings within the game. And it doesn't do enough stat reduction. Even something like Azura that you get for free from Merlantis will overall do more effective value, as it has extra turn potential, as mana accumulation. You get it for free. It is an epic rarity, I guess, the other one, but, you know. Overall, this thing's just never going to have a use case, unfortunately. It just doesn't do enough and has no follow-up. And the choice mechanic really doesn't make that big of a difference. Even if it worked on both and had some kind of, like, extra effect, probably still wouldn't get used. And the only thing we didn't go over then is the new weapon on the paid side. Oh, yeah, also, technically, I guess the new pet. They have started, it looks like, adding new pets. Before, for several of the campaigns, it was actually pretty bad value, in the sense that the pet was an already existing one. Like, let's say before, the Whitehelm pet would have been a Whitehelm Kingdom bonus. However, now we ended up getting one that gives additional stats to a specific troop. So it does look like we're going to start getting actual new troops, or new pets coming in through the system. Whereas before, they were kind of recycling whatever the Kingdom pet already was. In this case, Commander Dawnheart, which I've had to guess is the legend, ends up getting this. Yes, that is the case. So he will eventually have 5 to all stats, which will up his damage a little bit. Obviously, that's like 20 damage to all enemies, which is not a small amount. Actually, even more than that because of his armor boost ratio. So I'm not sure what that effectively comes out to, but that's not too bad. Like 28-ish, somewhere around there. Extra damage they ends up getting for having the pet compared to not having the pet, as far as overall total damage. That's not going to make him magically viable, but, you know, a little bit of a benefit if you need like a Guard's Avatar alternative for Whitehelm-related events, which I believe we do have a Whitehelm event next week, so that will be relevant. Keep in mind, this event week is not Whitehelm. While we are getting the Whitehelm Kingdom Pass and everything, it is actually currently a Druk Zoom event. With that being said, actually, before we go into the Druk Zoom thingy, one other thing to mention with Whitehelm. This thing can now reach 30 stars. There are technically 3 points in which this kingdom can reach 30 star, depending on how much you've bought into various things within the game. Technically, if you bought the extended pass on the Kingdom Pass, you could have done it last week. This week, you can end up doing it if you end up getting some of the troops. If you have the paid pass on this one, you can actually get it immediately. Otherwise, I think in several days from now, you should be able to have enough for free to be able to go and get 30-star Whitehelm. And alternatively, if you're going like ultra free and you're still missing some stuff, we're going to be getting even more Whitehelm troops. You'll be able to get the Legend by then. You'll be able to get the Terror card by then if you have the other side. But overall, you'll be able to go and have enough troops to pretty much guarantee have enough to go max out Whitehelm, assuming you're way later in the game, of course. Earlier on in the game, still quite a milestone to get to 30-star. But yeah, between last week, this week, and next week, it is officially very 30-starable. With that being said, I figured this week we actually go and do it since we have the Kingdom Pass. I guess to some degree it would be thematic to also do it next week when it actually has the events. But we're going for it this week. We're getting our armor. We're getting our better tribute. For any of you that don't know, Whitehelm is actually your best kingdom to set as your tribute. The main reason for this is the tribute that you end up getting from Whitehelm is pure glory. And out of the ratio of how tribute is distributed between these three stats, glory is by far the most useful one. So being able to have a maxed out Whitehelm is just definitively the best location you can ever set your home kingdom to. And now that we finally have it max, we'll be able to get the best benefit from it. The only other thing Home Kingdom really does for the most part in the current state of the game is like change the background here. Like right here, you can kind of see the castle from Whitehelm, the background over there from Whitehelm has this little glow effect. Some of the other kingdoms have different ones there. But you can basically change that so your profile looks a little bit different and all that. But for the most part, you just set it as Whitehelm because it gives the biggest amount of benefit. And now, with all the changes that they've made, we should just be able to go and click this, get 2 additional armor permanently, which of course will help Guard's Avatar, Rowan, Tesla, any of those armor boost ratio related troops. And there we go. We now have a 30-star Whitehelm, which of course in the current state of the game is as hard as they go, though I do feel like around 8.0 or something sometime soon they might tweak how kingdom power levels work, as we're starting to get a lot of 30 stars coming into the game, or, power level 30s. So it'll be interesting to see if they extend the system as some kind of system on top of the system, or what exactly is going to ultimately end up happening with it, because yeah, a lot of kingdoms starting to get capped out. That was one of the main progression systems of the game. And of course, main thing that this does is make our tribute even better, makes our tribute chance higher, makes our tribute reward a little bit better. And of course, most notably, we now have 2 permanent armor, one from getting level 20 and one from getting power level 30 as the very last reward. There is also an extra stat. And as this stat is armor, that is 2 permanent armor on all troops forever now. Anyways, with that being said, this is not a Whitehelm event week, it is a Droxzoom event week. So let's go over the new troop. This thing is pretty useless, unfortunately. It does come with a terror mechanic, so they are trying to get more into actually applying it into the game. However, as it currently stands, there's basically nothing that really effectively does terror, I would say, in the current state of the game. This will obviously change in the future, but as far as this troop, it's not changing that at all. It inflicts terror on 1 random enemy, so you don't even get to choose, for each red ally. So, obviously he's a red ally, so at bare minimum you're going to do 1. I haven't actually tested it, but I assume if you have a team of 4 reds, it'll guarantee 4 times terror the enemy team, because that'd be really dumb if it could double up on already existing ones. But I'm pretty sure if you have a team of 4 red, it will 4 times terror the enemy team. The biggest issue with this is that it doesn't really do anything. Like, you're spending 12 mana just to get 10 souls and inflict terror on everything. That's pretty bad. No follow-up at all. He does have Fire Link, but that's not going to be enough to save it. There just isn't really any use case to use this. We really need more passive terror or something else that can really do it effectively, while just kind of having it as an extra add-on onto them. But yeah, as it currently stands, still nothing that does terror particularly well, and that troop does not change that at all. Anyways, with that being said, keep in mind that this event key week is for Droxzoom, not for Whitehelm. With that being said, as far as the Droxzoom drop table is concerned, I thought I saved this earlier, apparently not. All right, well, let's go get it real quick. Go to Droxzoom, go to base rarity, go to show all. So, as far as Droxzoom is concerned, the troops that are not in drop table include the Doom of Stone, which is only from Brown Doom events, which even though it is currently a Doom event this week, you cannot get a Brown Doom from it, as it is a Red Doom event. Let's see, what are the other ones? The 4 faction troops from Illithia, the the Celestial Dragon, the Gem Dragon. This is not the Celestial one. And that's it. So those 6 troops are the only ones you cannot get in the event key drop table. As far as opening event key drop table, it's pretty underwhelming. There's 2 mythics here. One is considered among one of the worst mythics in the entire game. The other one is the best stunner in the game. But generally, if you really wanted this thing, you'd probably just diamond for it. It's not a must-have, especially with how much curse teams are. There's already things that can alternatively stun, like, for example, Elemental's hero class, whereas a lot of times you might not have an alternative cursor. So for the most part, stun isn't as important, though it is still the most consistent way of doing it. It's just for elementals, you basically just get it for free, so very few use cases to actually use them these days. If you were to go and actually open event keys, I would say you're mostly looking for the legends, Glaceon and King Bloodhammer. They were both really good Doomskull mechanics. It's actually the kingdom that brought Doomskull into the game, and it was more broken when it came out, but it's still pretty strong in the current state of the game. This was the first double converter into Doomskull. It converts all yellows to blue and all red to Doomskulls. There are a few versions of this within the game at this point. However, it does have the benefit of having 65% reduction and immune to freeze. Doesn't have immune to entangle though, but immune to freeze still really nice in first slot, so you don't get frozen on skull. And 65% score reduction, obviously, when creating a bunch of skulls will help a lot in mitigating enemy damage. Aside from that, King Bloodhammer's most noteworthy thing is he summons a Doomstorm when an enemy dies, while also being able to still have a pretty strong Doomskull-related ability that converts all blues into Doomskulls, which also has pretty good synergy with this as it transforms all... Wait, didn't it? Yeah, it transforms all yellow gems to blue. So you can then transform all those yellow to blue from blue to Doomskull. So you have that double synergy where Glaceon goes into King Bloodhammer, and you just get a ton of value that way, which could be helpful for the Underspire event this week if you happen to be lacking things like some of the better damage sources, Mythics. So that could end up being your way to end up clearing out Underspire if you need a better alternative, because then your next best alternative for the low rarity team is like spam Illithian Servitor, which, actually, did I even mention it for that? Now that I think about it, did I even make the Underspire low team? Oh yeah, I went all in on the weapon. That's why I didn't show. Okay, never mind. I forgot the weapon's so broken this week. You just build entirely around the weapon. I was like, wait, why didn't I build around like double Illithian Servitor? I forgot. It's because if we go to the next event, we have the Tower of Doom. So of course, the most relevant thing about the Tower of Doom are these polearm weapons. These things are absolutely insane. It's basically almost like pre-nerf journey troops, every single one of these, except for color rather than typing. This one, of course, being associated to red. We're still missing two. I forget which two of those are off the top of my head. But this is the fourth of the 6 polearms. And then we'll get some kind of other weapon type. And yeah, this weapon type has been really solid. Deals a bunch of damage to the first 2 enemies, plus 2 per temporary level, so up to 20 additional damage for 40 total, since you're hitting 2 enemies with the double 20. It then creates a bunch of red gems for each red ally, which by default you'll have 1, as the weapon itself is a red ally, and enemy. So if generally speaking, the enemy will have at least 1 red, which means if you have a pure team of red and the enemy has at least 1 red, you're creating in most situations 10 red gems. And that can be as high as 16 if your entire team is red and the entire enemy team is red. And even if once you get your double kill, that will still be 12. If your entire team is red and the 2 remaining troops on the enemy team are red, there's still a lot of gem spam while having some pretty substantial damage. And in the case of Doom, aside from having to use it for double points, it also against a Doom will also end up gaining a random status effect, which isn't that huge, but sometimes you can get a useful one, like Bless or Barrier or something similar, so can end up giving that a little bit extra value. But yeah, these weapons are pretty solid. They are good default weapons when you don't really have better options. And in the case of Tower of Doom, you have to use it this week in order to get double points, so definitely make sure it is on your team. I do highly advise spying up to this point. It is way better to get it through gems than it is through Soulforge, and there's actually other things to be crafting this week on Soulforge. Quite a few useful ones, actually, once we get around to that. But it's 500 gems to end up getting here. I do advise doing it if you're going to be bothering with the event. Helps out your guild a ton. You'll be able to go get a bunch of the Forge Scrolls to go upgrade Doom weapons, including this one if you want it. And of course, you get the Doom weapon itself, which is the most relevant thing that you end up getting throughout it all. Rewards and everything else still the same as it's always been. Main premise of this place is communicate with your guild where all of the better rooms are. This will allow you to go and know where all the ones that you need to take are. The main ones that you want to report back are Unlock, Power, Heroism, Haste, and pretty much any that your guild wants in order to just maximize on points. Like, for example, Luckies end up giving you 2 extra Dooms, but if you don't really want to go for high score, you can kind of ignore them. Like, you end up needing to reach like a threshold for Dooms, but once you reach a certain point, the leaderboard is just really, really bad for this event. And another one that tends to get skipped sometimes is Power. While Power does give you additional stats, it's generally falls off pretty quickly. Like right now, it's really beneficial to take Power, but once all these are like 15s, 20s, the diminishing return that you have on these is really, really, really bad, to the point that you can just do the sigils and just kind of rush, and mostly just go for the unlocks, heroisms, fireballs. Pretty much anything you see here. Fireball, heroism, and unlocks. Always the main 3. Everything else is basically on a case-by-case basis on if your guild wants to end up going for them or not. It really just depends on if you do. But don't do every single room, as unlike things like Underworld or similar modes, you actually do spend 1 sigil per battle, not 1 sigil per floor. So you don't want to be taking useless battles that are just going to give you like a little armor buff or something similar, as you're basically just wasting an entire sigil. So just communicate with your guild, find where the better ones are, and go from there. You'll end up getting all the standard rewards, with the main ones being a bunch of forge scrolls that can end up upgrading your weapons, as well as a bunch of knick-knack loot, as pretty much all these game modes do. Anyways, so next thing on our list, weekly events. So as far as weekly events, pretty tame this week. We mostly have everything happening with the current Whitehelm event that's going on right now. I guess technically just Friday with Bounty Hunter. But as far as things that we have going on throughout the rest of the week, Tuesday we have Illithia faction. This is a blue-purple restriction. Wednesday we have ourselves the Zoom pet. Thursday we have ourselves the class event for Slayer Hero class. Slayer is actually pretty interesting. It is the best overall damage pressure mythic. I mean, hero class. It ends up having 3 times, or 6 times, gosh, I will eventually say right numbers. It has a 3 times multiplier, correct the first time, to burning, while also having enrage, which allows it to do 1.5 times additional damage, and those do stack together. So you'll be able to go get the full amounts of the both the ratios, while also hitting through traits. So if they have dodge, if they have 50% reduction, or any kind of other reduction, you just hit right through it. And it's really, really, really good on skull spam rush teams, particularly for things like Explore 12. It's a little bit dangerous to be running for things like high-level Underspire or high-level Underworld, but for other modes where it's not really that big a deal if you lose, like Explore, for example, or even if you wanted to mess around with it in PvP and just kind of do a rush team with that, it's really good in those situations as it has the highest amount of damage skull potential of any hero class in the game. It's just very, very squishy and doesn't have much to stay alive. So in modes where it's really relevant that you don't end up dying, or it has permanent death like Underworld or similar things, you generally don't want to be running this hero class. But if the only thing that matters on a given fight is you just trying to win as quickly as possible and losing it doesn't matter, in those kind of situations you tend to use Slayer hero class. So if you haven't been upgrading it, definitely worth considering, as it does need to be level 100 before it's usable. It is one of those hero classes that's basically unusable until it is fully maxed, unfortunately, as the main gimmick of what it does require its final perk on level 100. And then Friday, we have ourselves Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter, of course, was getting normal troop as per usual, plays the same way as per usual, not really much to mention there. And I believe the new troop that we're getting is unfortunately pretty average, though. That's kind of to be expected for rares that we end up getting from Bounty Hunter events. Anyways, what isn't so average are the Soul Forge this week. The Soul Forge is actually absurdly good this week, in both the troops and the weapon category. So as far as troops are concerned, the most noteworthy one to mention first is the Wild King. If you are getting any one troop this week, it will definitely be Wild King. It's not like a must-have, but if you like running skull spam teams, it's definitely the way to go. He is effectively the best enrager in the game right now. He enrages all allies per cast, while also giving a ton of attack to all allies, and ends up creating a bunch of skulls in yellow. This is pretty relevant as he does use yellow, and of course everything that he does is already benefiting a huge amount from creating skulls, as he does enrage, which allows you to do more skull damage and hit through traits with your skulls, and does additional attack gain. So in a combination, he's just really good for pumping up your entire team to be a skull-hitting machine. And what's great about him is in modes where it doesn't matter if you die, similar to Slayer that we just talked about earlier, like let's say, for example, Explore 12, it's really good in those kind of situations where you're kind of just trying to rush down the enemy team as quickly as possible, and losing doesn't matter because there's no sigil system associated to it, or you are allowed to use your troops every single time. Like any kind of game mode where you don't get punished at all for losing, he's really, really, really good because he ends up applying this to not your first slot or to one single targeted thing, but to your entire team. So when one thing dies, your next troop is just as strong pretty much as your first troop was, not counting any kind of extra traits or anything it had. But it basically makes every single thing on your team absurdly good at doing skull damage, and it can even be strategic at times to actually kill out a troop, because if your first troop already used up its enrage, your second troop in line, assuming, ignoring any traits or anything, will technically have more damage than what your first troop had, as you will still have the enrage ready to go for the 1.5 times multiplier, whereas your first troop would have already consumed it. So overall, really, really solid mythic if you like running skull spam teams. Anyways, aside from that, there were 2 other ones that are kind of okay. For the most part, you're not really going for these, but they're still worth kind of mentioning. Phoenix, while its ability is pretty underwhelming, just has a pretty average amount of true damage. Its final trait is the main reason you would ever consider getting this thing. It blesses and enchants a random ally per extra turn, which gives you a bunch of immunity while also giving you a bunch of additional mana. This is particularly good against mana drain teams because not only are you going to be gaining passive mana against them, but Bless also gives you immune to mana drain, so things that normally would not have immune to mana drain can then end up gaining it. So overall, pretty solid, but very, very niche and almost entirely used for its final trait. And other than that, there was one other one, Voice of Orpheus. Similar, it is a very niche support troop. However, it does have the most amount of cleanse of anything in the game. Not the most convenient. I would still say that's overall probably Beatrix or Wand casting Bless. However, it does have Impervious while having cleanse on trait and cleanse on ability. This means even if a team is trying to counter out every option they have for cleanse, it is very unlikely that they'll have enough to counter everything that Voice of Orpheus can do. Because you can't just stun it away as Impervious, so you have to curse stun it. Even if you curse stun it, unless you also silence it, it'll just be able to cleanse on ability. So it normally has at least one way, even if it gets disabled on something, to still be able to get a cleanse. So it's one of those kind of troops that you put onto a team if you really need all of your traits, but the enemy team you're running against is trying to counter out, trying to curse stun, trying to do anything to make it so you don't have any traits. So really good counter to that, to be able to still keep getting your cleanses. Very, very niche though, but it comes into to play occasionally in PvP-like situations. It was used mostly for Guild War, though of course currently don't have Guild War these days. It only can occasionally come into niche situations in PvP as well, if you end up needing it just as a really consistent cleanser. Very niche utility troop, but still worth mentioning. One thing that you should end up getting a Soulforge this week, 100% regardless, is if you currently do not have the Ankh of Nefertani. This weapon is completely useless, but it is something you should not leave this week without. The main reason being is one of the 3 components needed to craft the Dustbringer. This weapon is really annoying to craft. Even if you feel like you're never going to use it, you probably still want to go get all 3 of its components beforehand, just so whenever you do eventually want to craft this, you don't have to worry about waiting like an entire year for all of them to rotate. So the Ankh of Nefertani, one of the 3 components you need, and then you can just hoard onto them and then eventually go craft yourself a Dustbringer. Even if you don't intend to get it, just start getting the components now. This should be the case for all of them. You should be doing this for the gosh, why did I forget its name? For Dustbringer, you should be doing this for the Ruby weapon. Even if you feel like you're never going to use them, you should always be trying to get their components, as if you do eventually decide you want to get it, you could be up to a year or so before all 3 components rotate. So definitely make sure to get this thing for your eventual Dustbringer, even if you never intend to get it. As far as actual good weapon that you should probably pick up this week, while I would say the Ankh is highest priority, this is pretty solid. I believe this is the first or second time, oddly enough, since the Geomancer hero class has existed, where you can end up picking up a Stone Slicer. This might be the first, I'm pretty sure it's second though. There's no way we've gone that long without getting a Drock Zoom event, but you never know. But I think this is the second time we've been able to get this since then. What's pretty relevant about it is one of only a few weapons that create double mana based on a typing that ends up feeding back to itself. It creates it creates purple and brown while using blue-purple. So it ends up creating purple while using purple. This is very solid to be able to feed back into yourself when using a pure construct team. And ever since the Geomancer hero class the other year, with 50% mana start to all constructs, this ends up getting some really, really, really good synergy with it. Of course, they have nerfed a little bit of a synergy, like before you used to use it with Chalcedony, which used to create a bunch of brown and used brown. However, it is still a very solid weapon. And out of any one actual useful weapon that's in Soulforge this week, I would say this is highest priority, other than this, which is actually technically highest priority. And aside from that, Doomed Blade. While I don't feel like these are used as often these days, they're still really solid. The 6 original OG Doom weapons that ends up dealing damage to all enemies and converts a certain color into Doom Skulls. These are still really solid. I don't feel like they see as much use cases these days, but they do have their niche situations. For example, this week, if you needed a AoE damage source, and you don't have the Gem Dragon, well, you could go get this weapon from Soulforge and use it for the Drug Zoom event this week for the Underspire. So there are alternatives and still use cases for it. But it is a bit more niche than it was when it originally came out, but still overall, pretty solid weapon, especially if you're looking for a Skull Spam weapon or even an AoE weapon when under certain restrictions. And that's pretty much everything in regard to Soulforge there. Anyways, is there any other big thing to end up mentioning? Obviously, campaign's wrapping up soon, so definitely make sure to be making your progress onto that to get all rewards. Next week is the last week for it, so any progress you want to make on that. Oh yeah, I don't think I actually mentioned it. I really should have earlier when I was mentioning the Kingdom Pass. I mean Kingdom Pass. But you need to get 10 Battle Crashers per day. This ends up giving you 20 crowns. The easiest way to do this is just go to any explorer that you prefer and just quick kill here. With either Rowain quick kill, Dust Devil quick kill, whatever you want to do. Either with a Rowain team, Dust Devil team, other Dust Devil team, whatever you have. Anything that can kill it out very quickly. And just keep doing that over and over again, and you'll end up getting your daily things. There's a few other locations you can get it, but realistically, just spam Explorer. It's going to be the quickest way to get it done. You can get it done in like 10 minutes or less or so every single day, so unless you get really unlucky on it. However, they have, as of a couple Kingdom events ago, they have streamlined the rarity of all of them. So no longer is the last 2 absurdly rare to get. Every single one has the same rarity of occurring, which makes it really, really quick to get your 10. And do make sure to be doing this daily. This is a daily that does expire, in the sense that if you don't do it on a given day, you do lose the value from it. It's one of those few events in this game that are like that, so do make sure to be doing this every single day, as it is extremely not worth spending 100 gems per skip, as it is way too expensive to bother doing that. And obviously the money option is also way too expensive to bother with. But yeah, just make sure to be doing it every single day. It's pretty quick. This is a little bit extra daily for the next 2 weeks, but it gives you a ton of rewards along the way. Anyways, let's go now into a bunch of teams. So all these teams will be in the description, but I'm also going to be messing with 2 of them, the 2 new mythics. And by 2 new mythics, I mean the 2 new mythic reworks. But anyways, let's start all the way from the top. Obviously, for red Doom events, you have to use pure red team. For the first one, well, I try not to use Stellarix too often. This is basically just going to be an all-in Stellarix team. Obviously, put your best damage source there that happens to be red. Doesn't have to be Stellarix. We just have to be using Stellarix, but every other alternative is. But doing the Doom up and into Talk Chakras is going to be one of your easiest ways to end up winning out. And having just something that can use every single color to absorb all of it is kind of convenient if you have Stellarix, Diamantina, and even if not, just your best red damage source can end up being fine. And you can even tank with Hero if you really want to. Though with this, I'm actually using Sunspear, so we can get Perpetual Red Storm just to keep our red up a little bit better, as this thing will be spamming a lot of red. And keep in mind, you have to use this weapon in order to get double points for Red Doom. In all the other cases that we're going to be using it for other game modes, it's not required, though pretty strong. However, for Red Tower of Doom, it is required to use for double points this week. Aside from that, as far as the lower rarity team, I did go with 2 legends that aren't faction related. However, the basic premise of this team is just a weapon into Angry Mob, and just use a tank hero class. I happen to be using Titan here just to get some Brownstorm for that. However, you can be using Elementalist if you feel like it's safer. However, you don't get half mana start, but you can put any tank hero class you want here. I just happen to be using Titan. But the main premise of the team is tank hero class with the weapon with Angry Mob. The other 2 are flexible to be absolutely anything. I just showed some mid-range ones, so 2 legends here. However, if you don't have these, just downgrade to whatever red damage sources you have. And obviously, if you have upgrades, put like, you know, Stellarix, whatever else you have there. Anything else that can end up being strong, that's under the red category. So basically upgrade and downgrade accordingly. This is the mid-range as far as damage is concerned. But just put your better or worse damage sources depending on what you have. Next, we have ourselves the Illithia faction event. This is going to be tomorrow, Tuesday, and consists of blue-purple restriction. As far as the team, pretty standard Rowan quick kill. Nothing really to mention there. Same as per usual for most things. However, one thing I did end up changing up a little bit is now that we have the Archdiva buff, I figured, hey, why not? Archdiva now gives a whole extra set of damage. So right now it's giving an additional 45 attack, HP, and armor. And keep in mind, it's actually going to be way more than that, because in Underworld, you have way higher magic than you normally do. And that gets a whole extra set. So if you have like 30 extra magic in Underspire, in Underworld, I mean, you're going to have a whole extra set of that to end up buffing to your first slot, which will give a bunch of HP, armor, and attack. And this is obviously really good with skulls, as you end up utilizing all that attack value. Of course, you could be using on Zul'Goth as well. Or it just depends how you want to go about it. This is a little bit of a safer layout for it. Obviously, also to utilize triple damage burning, which of course also gets multiplied. So whatever attacking we have, we'll end up getting multiplied. Let's say we have almost like 200 attack for the mode. That's going to end up being absurdly high. That's going to end up being 600 additional damage per skull that we end up taking with triple damage burning into Zul'Goth. It's going to be a lot of additional damage. Of course, we do need them to actually be burnable, but even on things that aren't, we're still hitting so hard that it's barely going to matter if they can or cannot be burned. So, and if you cannot burn them, you can just go for a curse on your wand, of course, and do it that way. Anyways, as far as Pure Faction, we have this team. Lithian Colossus, you do not actually ever cast. Do not cast this thing. Even if it's about to die, probably don't even cast it. Though, I guess you could then. Oh, wait, never mind. This isn't the one with the horrible boost ratio. So I'm not sure why on earth has that boost ratio over there. But, never mind. I thought this was the one that did almost nothing. Never mind. This one's fine. You can cast this one. It steals a bunch of life, or it steals a bunch of magic from an enemy, and it shifts it into both life and armor. Which, you should only be doing this if it's starting to die. But he has 50% score reduction. He's by far the tankiest thing you can use here. Your main win condition is a cast Illithian Servitor until you win. It's one of those pure factions where you basically just keep spamming the AoE until you chip them down and win. It's not the most fun of them, but it does get the job done. It's just a very slow chip damage until you've done enough to kill them all. And we have ourselves the Hive Mind here. Definitely not required. You could actually triple up onto a Illithian Servitor if you really wanted to. However, main thing we're doing with this, it steals a bunch of magic from an enemy and shifts it into a random skill on all allies, which ideally will give you magic for your Illithian Servitor, is the main thing you're hoping for there. However, regardless, half the time it'll give you extra durability so you don't die, and occasionally give you attack to skull pressure with. Also gives you a little bit extra stats from its final trait, but for the most part, not really doing too much. You're mostly just hoping it goes into magic. And alternatively, you can go with a triple Lithian Servitor. It is more consistent damage to do it that way. However, a single magic buff from this at a 1 in 4 chance does give you substantially more damage. So it really depends if you want more luck-based damage or guaranteed damage. Anyways, Slayer class event. As far as this is concerned, we have to use dwarves from Droxzoom. With that being said, one of the easiest ways to do it is just run a pretty standard quick kill weapon, and then just go a billion gem hammers. She has Empower into a damage poke. This also basically one-shots monsters, which is pretty nice, as one of the battles does have a few monsters in it. The one from that one desert area. Why do I forget its name? Leonis Empire. That one Leonis Empire fight with like Korvash and everything. I'm not sure if we'll have it this Thursday because it tends to be random each time. But if it is, I think almost everything in that fight is a monster, so you end up one-shotting it all. But aside from that, this is also really useful for the Orc fight, where there's that 100% revived Drake that becomes, another troop. And it's really good at targeting that out, because after you AoE kill them, you can then go use all your gem hammers to target out that one troop. So it ends up getting it done pretty nicely. Other than that, you could go for some kind of mana link or something similar. I went the all-in gem hammer route. Anyways, next we have ourselves Underspire. Underspire this week is a Droxzoom restriction, so you're allowed to use any weapon or troops from Droxzoom. With that being said, we are building a Doomed Impaler team for both of them. While there are a few other alternatives as far as weapons, like that one blue AoE weapon, Doom weapon, we are just going all in on this. It's easy enough to end up building a red team from this kingdom, and we're just going to basically keep spamming this until you win. You can go a tank hero class. We somewhat did here with Titan. You can play it even safer if you want to go like Elementals or something. Or if you want to play it riskier or doing earlier fights, you can end up going something like Sunspear with Perpetual Redstorm. Or it just depends where you're at the given moment in time. I went with a little bit of an in-between here for a hero class, but it always depends what you want to run. And if you're on the earlier fights or super late fights, where late fights obviously you definitely want some amount of tank ability. But we're just going to be spamming this weapon until we end up winning. We have a little bit of AoE here, though. Keep in mind, the Gem Dragon is very much not needed. You could easily get it done without it. Some early Obsidius, not really needed, but does have some stun. Does have a little bit extra damage there. And Ice Goblin is going to be your main one that you're going to be going to if you need a low rarity option. When we go to low rarity, we actually... oh no, we didn't double up on it. I forgot. I actually ended up putting one cannon here. But you can double up on it. It does do an okay amount of mana accumulation. Explodes 2 gems, and it frees a random enemy. But the main thing that's really relevant about this is the gain extra turn part. If that's all that it did, it would be so bad. 2 explodes into a freeze. It's horrible. But the auto extra turn into that actually makes it pretty okay. The only big issue with it is you do not get to choose where either of the 2 explodes go. But the fact that you have auto extra turn can sometimes match it into a 4 times, a 5 times. There's a lot of situations where you can just get immediate value from it beyond the 2 explodes. Because the actual amount of mana you're getting from 2 explodes is not that great. But the amount of mana you can get from the fact that you get an extra turn immediately to be able to action upon those explodes is pretty solid a lot of times. And we just have a flame cannon here for a little bit of poke damage, but you can double up on that. And the main premise as before is just keep doing Doomed Impaler until you win. And Curse After Jesus here is a tank. It has 50% score reduction, and it has 4 times Curse if you so choose, which synergizes really well with Elementalist. I'm going Tank Hero here, just to play it really safe, especially if you're earlier on in the game. Needing to run lower rarity stuff, you're going to need the tank ability that Elementalist has. And this has really good synergy because you have 4 times Curse into all of the perks that Elementalist has on final trait. So even if you don't have your Elementalist leveled, you'll still get a lot of value from it. Though it is advised to have at least level 40 so you can get Barrier on Brown, which I currently do not have set. I forgot I still have Submerge. Wait, let me actually go change that for when we do the copy paste. The reason I have Submerge is because of the current state of PvP. That's really funny. But let me actually go back to Barrier there, as in most situations you're running Barrier on Brown, not Submerge. But yeah, PvP is like all just Stellaryx right now. So kind of useful to have a little bit of Submerge here and there. But in most game modes, especially like these, it is way better to have Barrier on Brown, as most of the teams that you're dying to, or you're not actually dying to AoE damage, you're actually dying to skull damage pressure a lot of times. So being able to have skull reduction, being able to have Barrier on Brown, very useful things to not die with. Also, of course, having Curse into Entangle, also really good for that. Anyways, next we have ourselves the 2 teams we're actually going to go use. So, also I feel like we never really go over teams on videos. Do you guys want that more often? I feel like these videos already go on pretty long. For example, we're pretty much at the 40-minute mark. But would you guys actually be interested in if we start showing like more actual active teams? Because I look back at like some of the Monday videos and I kind of realized, wait, like some months we don't do like a single battle in some of them, other than like the Mythic video. But obviously we do it all on stream and everything. But yeah, there's like some months we almost do like not a single battle in any of the videos. I just find that really funny. But anyways, unfortunately, a little bit of a mana issue here. I went with a Leprechaun. There are obviously other things we could be doing for mana accumulation here. The only problem with Leprechaun is that it's basically just one big burst at the beginning, and then we have nothing. And this team is really dependent on getting a lot of mana initially to kind of snowball from there. And of course, he has freeze. Oh, that is so bad. It's an issue that a lot of teams have these days, where you don't necessarily go for other alternatives just because there's just such quick mana options these days. Anything like this almost feels glacially slow. But let's go get our big poke in there. As you can see, we got our absurd amount of stats, which for Explorer 12 at least, does bring Lord of Slaughter to one-shot range for all of these battles. So that's not too bad at all. Let's go get our yellow and just go for the Wild King. And there we go. Also, what on earth just killed it? Wait, what? I guess that was residual damage from the skull spam. Next, let's go into the Guard's Avatar team. There are two different ways to run this. You could run it either with Urskia Shield, or you can end up running it with Cog. Golden Cog ends up doubling an ally's armor, which this is more useful if you're going to be doing it twice or more. Whereas Urskia Shield is generally more useful if you're only going to be casting it once. And in this situation for Explorer 12, I believe we only need it once. Let me actually go give him some armor. Actually, wait, does he gain more benefit from magic or armor now? Oh, that's kind of interesting. With the changes they just did to Guard's Avatar, he actually gains the exact same value from magic as he does from armor. So if you were to set armor, he gains 8 armor, which is 4 additional damage to all enemies. But if you set 1 Nisha, which is 4 magic, he used to only get 2 extra damage, but now gets 4. So he actually gains the same benefit of having Nisha set as he does from having armor set. So this means going forward, you actually set magic when using Guard's Avatar, which is kind of cool. In the past, it was similar to Tesla teams and such, and Rowan teams, where you had to run armor on your team. But it's actually really beneficial, because that means if you're using a, let's say, like a Thrall on the team, or Marilith, or, you know, something that has Mass Destroy, it actually gains to get the benefit from that magic. And similarly, in this case, we're using our Urskia Shield. Before, we would have had to set armor, so we would have been getting no additional magic from our medals, but now we can go all in on magic. So, okay, that's pretty cool. Actually, I can actually go really all in on magic. We already have Mana Star on everything. Everything's already starting with 50% or 100% with the Empower. So, yeah, we can actually set triple magic now instead of triple armor, which is actually even more of a buff to Guard's Avatar than I was really thinking about at the time. Because, yeah, you don't have to set armor anymore, which means all your other... Because obviously, generally when running a team like this, with a Rowan team, Guard's Avatar team, anything like that, Tesla team even to some degree, the armor doesn't really help with other things on your team. Like this thing having higher armor, not helping his damage. This thing having higher armor, not helping how much armor you gain. Stuff like that. Some mana accumulators obviously benefit from higher magic. But yeah, now they can set magic, all those things gain a benefit. We're getting more armor now. We're getting more damage on this if we have to resort to it. Technically we get more explodes, though he already has plenty of explodes. He does not need more. But yeah, that's actually even more of a buff to Guard's Avatar. Even though his damage didn't get too much of an increase, it's almost more so the Nishas that you can now use that end up doing the bigger benefit. It's still the same amount of effective damage that he's getting. So he's not getting any more damage from the medals, but everything else on your team now benefits more from this change that ends up having to Guard's Avatars. That's kind of interesting. So as far as this guy's used, you just throw the shield onto him. I'm actually not sure if this is enough to one-shot. We're about to find out. I sure hope so. It is not. Okay. Golden Cog wouldn't be enough either. Yeah, we still have to double buff. That's not ideal. Okay, that's not going to be as useful then. So yeah, Guard's Avatar is still the same as it has been. The only use case for Guard's Avatar is to go use it on Tuesday faction events, or, you know, the low-level faction range. It does not seem like there is much other use case. You basically just go for that rush on those kind of modes, and that's about it. But hey, at least we get to utilize his higher amount of magic damage now. In the past, that might not have actually done enough damage, but in this case, it does now. Okay, we do have Enrage, so we'll be able to kill that out. And unfortunately, no extra turn there, and no skull to go take, but we can just kill him out with the final Guard's Avatar there. Unfortunately, he does gain armor there, and we don't have any way to chip away at that. Actually, you know what way we do? I could actually go Leprechaun, chip at him. We can throw down Leprechaun and then just whack him. But yeah, unfortunately, it's an interesting change to Guard's Avatar. However, I would say its main use case is obviously just making Tuesday faction events a little bit easier. Whenever you have a brown or yellow restriction. Technically, you can run them on red as well, but you almost always want to be using them with Surqua and Hadley. But I definitely have to say, of the two, the one that definitely got the bigger benefit is Archdiva. I'm really curious to see how this pans out in the future. Archdiva has a lot of potential as really high mana cost troops come into the game. Obviously, in this case, we're using on a 27 mana cost Lord of Slaughter. But anything that's a super high mana cost that also is really skull-oriented gains a really big benefit from it. So let's go and do all that. See if we can go get our mana. We do have alignment, so I'm going to do that and then mana accumulate from our Mass Explode. I'm then going to do it again, give him his massive buff, give him full mana. Look at his stats now. That's insane. He gets up to one-shot range on everything. Honestly, we don't even need this Wild King. I should have just made it another mana accumulator. This Wild King's not even needed. We already have so much overkill already, just from Archdiva into Lord of Slaughter. That is so good. But yeah, Archdiva definitely got the better end of the buff. I'll still be using Guard, as we normally do on Tuesday faction events, but he's still a lot more niche, as he's always been. But yeah, this is the true MVP of the buff changes that they ended up doing to Whitehelm. He definitely by far gained the biggest benefit out of anything in the kingdom. And both these true troops are already really good, but yeah, now there's even more of a use case for it. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out, especially as we get more troops like Lord of Slaughter being added to the game, as it's one of the bigger synergies that it currently has, which is why we're running a Lord of Slaughter team here. But obviously there are other things you could do. Basically, any skull-oriented team, like earlier we showed it with the Zolgoth build, but any kind of team that is skull-oriented that will use a first slot that's like 20 mana cost or higher tends to be pretty good with. And yeah, it just gives a bigger buff now on top of everything else it already did. Well, also, I didn't mention this earlier. It also has Barrier Blast. I was mentioning that one mythic earlier that's in Soulforge that has Bless Enchant, which is still pretty good. However, this thing gets a free Barrier Bless, which will keep you protected whenever skulls get hit back, as well as Blast, which can get rid of Entangle, get rid of Freeze, you know, other annoying effects. So still really good. So he does still do something. He can only cast once, but after he casts, he still has a really good final trait. So still get some value in there. Anyways, guys, I believe that is everything. That'll wrap it up for now. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Best of luck on everything. Definitely make sure to be doing the Kingdom Pass every single day so you can go maximize the rewards, even if you're only doing the free side. Still a good handful of stuff as far as a couple deeds, a weapon, some of the troops, stuff like that. And keep in mind, even if you're not really bothering with the Kingdom Pass or not bothering to pay for it, all this stuff will be available in the future in about 2 months from now or so, after, several weeks after the event. It'll all be available through various means. Like, for example, this will be in the Volkey drop table in about 2 months. This will be in just standard drop table, so by the time we go for like the August Mythic, you'll just randomly get this as a drop when you go for that. Stuff like that. So it's all going to be available in the future, including the pet. It'll be in pet drop table, I think almost immediately. Pets are a little bit weird and weird. I think they almost immediately go into drop table after the event is done. Or maybe there are 4 weeks, I'm not sure. It feels like they always change it like every year, how that works. But generally speaking, by about 2 months from now, every single thing here should be in their respective drop tables where you would normally find the corresponding thing. So they will all be obtainable in the future, so don't have to worry too much about it. But anyways, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful week. I'll catch you guys later. Feel free to leave a like on the video. Helps a lot and is greatly appreciated. And goodbye, everyone. Thanks for watching.